April 1958. Paris is breathing the cool air of spring, but on the Rue de Beaux-Arts, the atmosphere is electric, almost suffocating with anticipation. A crowd gathers outside the Iris Clert Gallery, a space no larger than 20 square meters, yet tonight it is the center of the avant-garde universe. Two Republican guards in full regalia, plumes trembling in the breeze, stand sentinel at the entrance. They are guarding nothing, or so it seems. Step inside. The walls have been stripped, scrubbed, and painted a blinding, clinical white. The furniture is gone. The canvases are missing. The air smells faintly of cleaning agents and the perfume of the bewildered elite. This is Le Vide, the void. Yves Klein, the man who claimed the sky as his first artwork, has not merely removed the art, he has impregnated the empty space with what he called pictorial sensibility. Observe the visitors. They are not looking at objects, they are navigating a presence. Some laugh, dismissing it as a farce. Others stand silent, overwhelmed by the sheer audacity of the vacuum. Klein, a master showman and a mystic, insisted that the gallery was not empty, it was full. It was saturated with the raw essence of art, liberated from the prison of the canvas. He had spent days alone in the space, mentally projecting his blue sensibility into the walls, sensitizing the very air molecules. To enter the room was to walk inside a painting that had no physical form. But Klein understood a fundamental truth about the human condition. We struggle to value what we cannot hold. The void was a sensation, a moment, a philosophical provocation. But could it be owned? Could you buy a piece of this charged atmosphere and take it home? This question gnawed at the boundaries of the art market. If art is a spirit, a vibration, then selling a painting is like selling a cage and pretending you've sold the bird. Klein wanted to sell the bird, the song itself, unencumbered by matter. This desire birthed the zones of immaterial pictorial sensibility. It was a radical evolution from the gallery exhibition. If Le Vide was the temple, the zones were the sacrament. Klein proposed a transaction that defied economic logic. He would sell you a specific zone of this invisible artistic essence, but unlike the gallery show where the experience was shared and ephemeral, this was a transfer of ownership, a deed to the void. The critics called him a charlatan. They saw a man selling thin air to the gullible bourgeois. But look closer at Klein's intent. He wasn't mocking the market, he was spiritualizing it. He was asking us to acknowledge that the value of art lies not in the oil, the pigment, or the frame, but in the immanence, the feeling that resides within the viewer. By 1959, he was ready to formalize this. He created receipt books, looking for all the world like standard banking documents, assigning serial numbers to parcels of nothingness. Yet, to treat this as a mere prank is to miss the profound melancholy that underpins the work. It is an attempt to capture the fleeting, to put a price tag on a ghost. And as we will see, the currency for such a ghost could not be mere paper money. It had to be something as ancient and enduring as the void itself, gold.
The transaction begins not with a handshake, but with a scale. We are on the banks of the Seine, or perhaps in a quiet gallery backroom, but the gravity of the moment suggests a sacrificial altar. The buyer presents their payment, 160 grams of pure, solid gold. The weight is heavy, undeniable. Gold is the metal of the sun, the ancient standard of value, immutable and eternal. In exchange, Klein hands them a receipt. It is a small, rectangular piece of paper, meticulously designed, certifying ownership of Zone of Immaterial Pictorial Sensibility, Series No. 1. At this stage, the transaction is vulgar. It is a trade, commodity for paper. The gold sits in Klein's hand, heavy with material worth. The receipt sits in the collector's hand, a legal tether to the invisible. If the process stopped here, it would be a failure. The art would still be trapped in the realm of possessions. The collector would own the void just as one owns a car or a stock option. Klein, a student of Rosicrucian mysticism and judo, knew that true possession requires sacrifice. To truly internalize the art, the physical evidence of the transaction had to be annihilated. This is the ritual of the indefinite refusal. Klein offers the collector a choice. They can keep the receipt, but if they do, they only own a piece of paper. The sensibility remains external to them. But if they want the authentic immaterial value, they must burn the receipt. Imagine the scene. The collector, perhaps a wealthy writer or an architect, strikes a match. The flame catches the corner of the certificate. The paper curls, blackens, and dissolves into ash. In that moment, the legal proof of ownership vanishes. The object is gone. The receipt is smoke. But by destroying the proof, the art enters the collector. It becomes a memory, a part of their biography, an indelible mark on their soul that no thief can steal and no fire can destroy. But the ritual demands balance. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it abhors an imbalance of debt. Klein cannot keep the gold. If he pockets the wealth, he is merely a merchant who tricked a buyer into burning their contract. So, in the presence of an art museum director, an art dealer, and 2 witnesses, Klein walks to the edge of the river. He takes half of the gold ingots, wealth that could feed a family for years, and throws them into the Seine. Watch the gold arc through the air. It hits the dark water with heavy, final plunk, sinking into the mud and silt of the riverbed. It is gone, returned to the earth. The fire consumed the receipt, the water consumed the gold. The material equation is zeroed out. Nothing remains on either side. No object, no money, no proof. And yet, in this absolute material negation, the art is fully realized. The zone now exists purely in the relationship between the artist and the collector, sealed by a mutual act of destruction. It is a performance of staggering commitment, turning the capitalist exchange into a holy sacrament of loss and transcendence.
What are we left with when the ripples in the Seine fade and the ash blows away? In the eyes of the law, nothing. In the eyes of the market, a loss. But in the landscape of the mind, we are left with a monument. Yves Klein's Zones of Immaterial Pictorial Sensibility forces us to confront the weight of the immaterial. We often speak of the burden of ownership, the insurance, the restoration, the storage, the fear of theft. By destroying the physical traces of the artwork, Klein liberated the collector from this burden. The art became weightless, yet it acquired a gravity that no sculpture could possess. Consider the modern echoes of this act. We live in an era of NFTs and digital ownership, where we pay fortunes for lines of code that point to JPEGs we physically cannot hold. We scoff at the absurdity, yet Klein was there 60 years ago, stripping away the screen and the code, leaving only the raw belief. He anticipated the dematerialization of art, but his version was warmer, more human. It required presence. It required the heat of the fire and the cold of the river. It wasn't a digital ledger, it was a visceral experience. The buyer who burned their receipt did not lose their investment. They integrated it. The art became a part of their cellular history. When Michael Blankfort, the American writer, bought a zone and burned his receipt, he later said he felt a strange, light-headed sense of ownership. He owned a secret. He owned a moment of pure, unadulterated aesthetic belief. Klein had successfully transferred the blue, not the pigment but the feeling, directly into Blankfort's consciousness. Ultimately, Klein's masterpiece challenges the gaze of the viewer. Usually, we look at art. We critique its brushwork, its composition, its texture. Here, there is nothing to look at. We are forced to turn our gaze inward, to examine our own values. Why do we need the object? Why is the feeling not enough? Klein suggests that the highest form of art is not creation, but transformation, the alchemy of turning gold into water, paper into smoke, and money into sensibility. The zones remain one of the most poetic gestures in the history of art. They remind us that the most valuable things we possess are not the things we can sell, but the experiences we have consumed, destroyed, and internalized. The gold at the bottom of the Seine is likely gone, buried under decades of silt or scavenged by lucky divers, but the act remains, glittering in the history of ideas, a testament to the artist who dared to sell the void, and in doing so, proved that emptiness is heavy with meaning. So the next time you stand before a crowded canvas, ask yourself, would this be more beautiful if it wasn't there? Would you pay to burn it just to keep the memory of its colors forever?